Okay, ladies and gentlemen, after completing your research, the next step to writing a research essay is to formulate a thesis or an opinion on the topic. Just a reminder, your topic is the 60 Scoop in the fictional play Someday and in real-life First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. So your job is to explore the connections between how the characters are affected in the play Someday by the 60 Scoop and how real-life people have been affected by it in various communities across North America. In order to formulate our thesis, we're going to take a look at those three questions again. So these three questions right here, okay? The first question that I gave you when I introduced this assignment was, how are the characters in the play affected by the 60 Scoop? The second question was, how does the 60 Scoop threaten the preservation of identity in many communities? And lastly, how do the events in the play relate to what is happening or has happened in real life? Question 3 is really sort of the essence of your essay. We're looking at the events in the play, specifically the 60 Scoop, and how these events, fictional events in the play, relate to what is happening or has happened in many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities across Canada and the US. So in order to sort of figure out what our next steps are, we really have to answer this question. What is the connection? That is going to be our thesis statement. The connection between the play and the events in real life, that is the answer to our question. Now, in terms of writing your thesis, each of you is going to have a slightly different thesis statement, but they're all going to start more or less the same way. So your thesis statement should begin with something like this. In the play, Someday, the characters are affected by, the 60s Scoop in many ways. Like the characters in the play, many real-life First Nations communities have also experienced the long-term effects of the 60s Scoop. Specifically, and at this point you would list your 4 main reasons or your 4 main arguments. Okay. Now remember, I said that you need to really focus in on either 1 community or 2 communities or up to 4 specific communities. What really you could do is have each paragraph dedicated to 1 specific community and how they've experienced the 60 Scoop. Either that or each paragraph is going to be focused on 1 specific long-term effect of the 60 Scoop. If you want, you can also do 2 and 2 because you have 4 paragraphs. So you could do 2 paragraphs dedicated to 1 specific effect and 2 paragraphs dedicated to another. It's fine as long as it's even. So either have 4 different ones, either have 2 and 2, or you can look at 1 specific long-term effect and 4 different aspects of that one effect. I realize this is a little bit confusing, so if you have questions, please ask me tomorrow in class. Okay, so if your thesis statement doesn't look exactly like this, that's more than okay. If we think about our thesis statement as a 2-part statement, the first part here is the part that states what we're trying to prove. What is it that this essay is trying to accomplish? Okay? The next part here, which is going to be your specific reasons, which are going to be different depending on the focus you've taken, that is the second part. That's the how are you going to prove it. If we think of it in 2 parts, it's like, what are you going to prove? How are you going to prove it? So in this essay, we are going to prove or demonstrate that the characters in the play Someday are affected by the 60 Scoop, just like many First Nations communities have also experienced, and that there's long-term effects of the 60 Scoop. The 60 Scoop didn't end in the 1960s. The effects of the 60 Scoop are still felt in many real-life First Nations communities today, as evidenced by the play Someday. Okay, so your job is to show the connection between the 2. Okay, once you've completed writing your thesis statement, I'm just going to remind you that your thesis statement always goes at the end of your first paragraph. Your thesis statement goes at the end of your first paragraph. I'm going to say that twice because it's that important. Do not put your thesis statement at the beginning of your essay. You do not start your essay with your thesis statement. You have to lead the reader gradually to your thesis statement. And what you're going to do, you're going to start out with a general statement about your topic, which is the 60s scoop. So something in general. For example, the 60s scoop affected many communities across Canada. Many people are experiencing the long-lasting effects of the 60s scoop. Or maybe a little bit about what the 60s scoop was. For example, the 60s scoop involved the Canadian government removing First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children from their homes and placing them with white families. Okay, do you notice how I didn't mention anything about my specific thesis? I'm just giving you a general introduction to your topic. Okay? The next part, in part 2 here, you need to expand on your previous statement a little bit more. Now we're going to get more specifically into loss of culture or long-term effects of the 60s scoop, because that is what your essay will focus on. In this section, you also have to introduce the play Someday and the author Drew Hayden Taylor. Then, lastly, you're going to end with your you're going to end with your thesis statement. How does the 60s scoop affect its victims, both in the play and in real life First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities? Okay, so end with your thesis statement. So just to wrap up how to write your introductory paragraph, you are going to start with a general statement about the topic, which is the 60s scoop. In this statement, you are not going to mention your specific reasons or your specific thesis statement. All you're going to do is give the reader a general introduction to the 60s scoop. The second thing you're going to do is you are going to expand on your previous statement a little bit more. Here is when you get a little bit more specific. And you do that by introducing the play Someday and the author Drew Hayden Taylor. Lastly, you're going to end with your two-part thesis statement. Part 1, what is it that you're going to prove? Part 2, how are you going to prove it? Okay, and that's 4 reasons or 4 issues, 4 topics that are going to be explored in your 4 body paragraphs. Okay? Once you've completed your thesis statement, please do not move on to the introductory paragraph until I have checked it and I have approved it. I want to work with you to make sure that your thesis statement is clear, concise, and accurate. There's no point in having you do all of that extra work while your thesis statement is not strong enough. So please, as soon as you write your thesis statement, put up your hand. I will come and check it. Then you'll be able to move on to the next part. Okay? Once you're done writing your thesis statement, you can move on and start writing your introductory paragraph. Once you finish that, you can move on to start writing the outline of your first body paragraph, and there will be instructions on how to do that in the next video that I will post. Okay? So good luck writing your thesis statement. I'm sure you'll all do fine, and we'll see you tomorrow.